Lamelo Ball is clearly one of the more unorthodox players in the league. He's got a lot of skills and uses a ton of techniques that we don't even really realize at first glance. So I dissected his game under the microscope for you guys in this installment of Attention to Detail. Let's break it down. Alright, so first off, although the efficiency is still coming along, he's clearly really comfortable and effective in the pick and roll. So let's break that down first. One thing that really helps him score around the paint on pick and roll action is actually how good of a passer he is. Since bigs are so worried about him diming it to that roll man, they'll usually drop a little bit closer to them, which often leaves him a pretty good driving lane. So him being a threat to pass actually helps him score. And he'll sell it pretty well too by giving this little look off to the roller as he attacks, just keeping that big man honest. He's also usually able to attack downhill because although he can knock it down, bigs aren't crazy worried about him shooting a mid-range in the pick and roll. So what that often comes with is this one pass away help defender reaching in. So to deal with that, he'll usually go over that hand with a big skip and a higher pickup. It's definitely a good option to have in the bag, especially for taller guards. Next, like you see here, when he has a bit more space, he'll kind of float the ball on his way downhill so that it buys him time and he can make any decision out of this. Maybe shoot, maybe pass, maybe even dribble again at the snap of a finger. At the end of the day, you can only do any of this if you have that ball in your hand. So if you can get this float down, it's an amazing way to control the ball for longer and not have to wait for that dribble to get back up to your hand to do any of this. You also see a lot of the time the Hornets slip their screens. So instead of getting his defender fully caught on the screen, he'll actually just kind of turn on the gas and get an angle on his defender. And since that screener slipped, they get into that roll quicker, which as a result means that hedge defender must return to them quicker. So this again usually results in a decently open lane to the rim. He's also really comfortable, it seems, with carrying some momentum into the screen, so kind of jogging into it and then really speeding up when he sees a quick opening. And how he'll usually do this is with an exaggerated high step. So this not only buys him a quick millisecond to slow down and pick up what's going on with the defense, but also puts his front foot in a position to really punch the ground and get him moving downhill with some speed.
Tweet, so he made a tweet for True, made a tweet for Chris, and made a tweet for Bobby.
Next is his finishing and floater game. Whether it's off a pick and roll or just a downhill drive, he's also really good at stopping short for floaters, but not necessarily stopping, more so maintaining his momentum moving through that shot. He's obviously a taller guard. Having a floater game is tough to defend when he's releasing it high and with speed forward to maintain that separation. And when he's able to make these with a ton of different release angles. This goes for both 1 foot and 2 foot floaters. He's able to make it all different angles. And speaking of angles, he's pretty damn good at getting it to go coming across the lane, which makes it easier for him to not attack the rim every time. So whether this is a floater like we just touched on, a scoop, a hook, kind of an extension finish across the lane, he understands that oftentimes he doesn't need to take that angle straight to the rim, right into the big man, but that especially being taller, he can take an angle slightly away and make it a more manageable, safe finish. On another angles-based note, he often sneaks a finish to the other side of the rim, which takes a calculated angle to do when you're attacking that close out of the rim. Again, helps that he has a longer wingspan, but this is a pretty effective way to protect the ball and finish. Watch some of his spin moves too. You can see how well he's able to maintain his speed through these. Of course, there's always a time and place for this. You don't want to get out of control, run into a defender, but being able to keep that same speed that you're driving with into your spin gives him an advantage in beating those players to that rim. He also uses a ton of one-hand pickups on finishes. And he has the touch to scoop it up into the finish with speed without really stabilizing with the other hand much. This allows him to use the offhand to protect, sense out, and shield defenders while getting into his finish. Plus he gets a full arm swing with that opposite hand to get into a bit more of an explosive single leg jump. But out of that, he's also proficient at switching hands in midair. This is a great skill to have to mitigate the effects of limited options when you just go up with that one-hand pickup. And who can really block a lay like this where he's able to switch hands mid-air to avoid wherever the defender places themselves? I guess it's pretty rare. And then finally, his weak hand finishing package is crazy to see. Some of these lefty extensions, inside hand finishes, floaters or hooks, they're crazy, considering how rare it is to get to that weak hand for these.
You never know when that call can change.
Now let's talk court vision. He's not just looking for the roll man on these pick and rolls. Of course, he'll hit those basic options, but even more impressively, he sees everything that's going on in a pick and roll situation. Screens naturally create chaos and rotations, so there may be players popping up to the perimeter, cutting behind distracted defenders, and more. And he has tabs on all of that. And part of what helps him do this is that patience we talked about earlier. Maybe floating the ball a bit, being comfortable slowing down and letting the play unfold, rather than trying to make the quickest play possible. There's so much going on that not only does it take a few milliseconds at least to process, but it also takes time to happen. and doing this buys that time for him. And as I'll emphasize on a lot of the best passers' film breakdowns, never forget the easy pass. I always get people in the comments saying, that's not special, so easy, why are you breaking this down? But trust me when I say it's not that easy to consistently see and make this easy pass perfectly at any level, let alone at the NBA. Now, in terms of actually delivering the passes, he'll use two techniques pretty often, one of which is releasing it over defenders. And this isn't easy to muster up that strength to release it overhead and still with enough power to get it through to a teammate, all with defense closing on him at high speeds. And then second are one-hand passes, especially with momentum, as he's driving, and uses that momentum to deliver an on-point dime. Most times, this is significantly quicker than two-handed pass off the dribble, which obviously doesn't make it better at all times, but if it can be delivered accurately and safely like he does, it's an amazing option to deliver a pass without defenders being able to get a step on it. And lastly is ball handling. He actually only ISOs about 6% of all of his possessions, so most of his buckets are situational ones, scoring off the pick and roll, attacking closeouts, and transition. But without a doubt, he can handle the ball with ease. Clearly, he's typically a bit wider with the ball, which can help sell moves a bit and throw defenders off by being outside of his frame, creating angles, all that. But to me, it's more so just fun to see because I don't think enough players are comfortable with that ball outside of their frame, especially since we're always taught to keep it super close to us. And Lamelo is clearly most comfortable dribbling high and wide and hasn't let anyone coach that out of him, stays true to his game. But at the same time, for a taller guard who plays very wide and doesn't play crazy low, he's exceptional at working with low and quick dribbles when he needs to in these tight spaces. So he can alternate between that tight and wide dribble. You'll also notice that he has a super quick pickup into his jumper, especially off this behind the back. Part of how he does this is timing up the footwork to get it straight off the dribble into the upward motion. Notice how he really attacks the ground with his feet, and they hit right as he picks that ball up, so everything is moving up explosively in sync. And this goes for really all ISO shots off the dribble too, as he's gotten really unpredictable with when and how he picks up the ball. Whether it's the timing of it, whether it's kind of lulling them to sleep with slower moves and then quickly speeding up into the shot, he's always finding ways to throw off that defender and get off a comfortable shot. Yet, and I know this isn't ball handling, but it's interesting to dissect in this context, his comfort is in a perfect shot with a perfect squared up, even base. Seems like he's pretty damn good at shooting from awkward foot positions, which actually helps him get these shots off quicker because he doesn't have to adjust his feet to find that perfect positioning. Another thing he loves while handling the ball is this little shake idea, constantly shifting the weight between the 2 feet, sometimes pretty rapidly. So what this does is not only keep the defender on their heels, but also sets him up to explode quickly, because he's kind of preloading up each leg to explode out when he needs to. Then lastly, notice the timing on his moves and his explosions. Super unpredictable. This is something I've been talking about a lot lately, and for good reason. For example, here he drives downhill when that ball is on the way down, so he kind of delays that explosion. Here he goes when the ball is on the way up. On this one, he kind of taps that foot, throws off the timing, and then goes. So all it is just keeping that defender on their heels at all times, never knowing when he'll actually explode downhill. So hopefully you guys got something out of this video. I would suggest you guys go try some of this stuff out, whether it's in a workout, by yourself, in a pickup game. Go apply it, let me know what you learned, and make sure to always drop feedback and suggestions in the comments. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at ByAnyMeansBasketball for a lot more like this. Thanks as always for tuning in.